Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix is coming up this weekend, but Ferrari are already starting to downplay their championship ambitions. Meanwhile, Red Bull's Helmut Marko believes that Ferrari are already buckling under the pressure of the championship battle. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Lots to dive into today. This of course is the pit lane view right now over there in Baku. Everyone is arriving, getting ready to go for the weekends. George Russell in the Mercedes, many other teams as well also getting some practice runs in. I'm pretty sure I saw a couple of drivers even preparing for Canada because I'm pretty sure there's very limited break between this Grand Prix and the Montreal one, right? So they're going to have to prepare effectively for both back to back. This I did want to mention though, because a bit of drama on the FIA side. Definitely we've heard lately that, the F1 teams and the FIA haven't necessarily had the greatest relationship these last several months and years really. And especially, it's maybe not the ideal time for the president of the FIA, Ben Sulayem, to make comments like this. He says the following right here. This I think is the key paragraph here early on. Niki Lauda and Alan Prost only cared about driving, which for very questionable statements straight out of the blocks there, but I suppose we can leave that as it is and address the rest of it with regard to today's drivers. And now Vettel drives a rainbow bicycle, Lewis is passionate about human rights, and Norris addresses mental health, which sounds like he's talking in a very positive light about these drivers, right? It seems to be a great thing that the drivers can express their opinions on certain matters and use their platform and their influence to put forward ideas and points and opinions and drive messages that they believe are valuable. Now, seemingly Ben Sulayem isn't particularly happy about this from the FIA side. Everybody has the right to think, but to me, it's about deciding whether we should impose our beliefs in something over the sport all the time. Effectively saying that, look, the drivers should just care about driving, not do any of this other stuff. I do wonder, of course, what would happen to some of these drivers back in, let's say social media was around in the days of James Hunt and co. That, I'd imagine that things would be rather spicy, and I don't know if Ben Sulayem would exactly have the same opinion of the drivers only care about driving, right? But yeah, thought it was a really interesting statement, and certainly not an ideal time to make a statement like this, because effectively saying that these drivers shouldn't be doing these things, right? They should just leave this for their own perspective and not do anything with regard to Formula 1. So, I don't know, strange time to come out with this, especially due to the already existing friction between F1, the drivers and the FA themselves on the kind of jewelry shenanigans as well that, Sulayem mentions right here. It's definitely intriguing perspective on that one, but of course, it's Baku this weekend. This is the track as per usual. The DRS is remaining the same as 2021. We'll see if this is going to be, too powerful or not, because Red Bull so far this season have had a rather good success on tracks like this when there's a long straight for a DRS overtake. Verstappen can get past Leclerc. He's going to struggle to get back at him with the lower straight line speeds that the Ferrari has had so far this season. With a few upgrades and tweaks here or there, the kind of drag on the Ferrari might be lower than it was before. Of course, that's going to be the key thing with Red Bull, that their drag on the car, even the engine might not be quite as powerful as Ferrari's, the drag is much more beneficial for these long straights, which effectively this is a 2-kilometer back straight here. There's a few kinks early on, about the time you get to the DRS detection zone, which is around about what they are calling turn 20. It of course you should be able to be within a second at this point to get the DRS all the way down the main straight and where the pit lane is, all that type of stuff, where Verstappen of course had the incident last time around. Another DRS zone here at the start of sector 1 as well. Interestingly, they've kept the detection zone before the corner, just so when it's before the corner instead of after the corner, there is always some potential for cat and mouse games to play out as they did, for example, in Saudi Arabia, and of course the first race actually this season in Bahrain. So we'll see if that one leads to anything, but it's not before the main DRS straight, so probably won't be too much of a big deal. But of course, the middle sector remains incredibly technical, the castle corner, this type of stuff as well. So it's really difficult to say which track or which team this should actually favour, because Charles Leclerc took pole here last season, and Verstappen looked to be on course for a race victory before, of course, the puncture of the blowout that he had that costed him, of course, the race victory. And we know that Leclerc has been absolutely imperious in qualifying so far this season, but will Red Bull's kind of straight line dominance remain? And of course, this track theoretically should suit them better than the Ferrari. Of course, they were seemingly quite heavily favoured in Monaco and probably would have won it without some questionable decisions from the strategy team, which of course, Helmut Marko is going to have a few pointers to in a couple of seconds time here. Now, speaking of some of the midfield, which team is going to be the best of the rest, I suppose, we kind of know that Mercedes is going to be there or thereabouts between Red Bull, Ferrari and McLaren, or whoever is going to be behind them. At least Norris seems to be the best of the rest at the present time at least. But Alfa Romeo believe that they've got a car that actually suits this track. They believe they've got a fair bit of power from that Ferrari engine under the bonnet. Not really how it works in Formula 1, you guys know what I mean. So they're confident in this weekend, as I'm sure a lot of teams are. Verstappen, of course, is looking to get some revenge effectively, because he's never finished on the podium in Azerbaijan. He's had 3 DNFs and a 4th place finish back in 2019. Last season, he effectively thought, okay, there's some degree of unfinished business. Says the following actually here in an F1 article: I'm looking forward to returning to Baku. We have some unfinished there after last year. It's a tricky track with big braking zones and a tight runoff. Finding the best setup is going to be a challenge. That's kind of the interesting thing actually here for Red Bull though, is because we saw, for example, in Miami that their qualifying or their practice hasn't been that that good. Neither is their qualifying. But by the time they get to the race, the car seems to be set up very nicely to deliver a very strong performance pretty much everywhere they've been so far. But getting the setup right does seem to be more of an issue for Red Bull than it does for Ferrari. It seems like Ferrari just chuck it on any old track and it's going to perform rather well, but its absolute maximum ability might not be quite as much as the Red Bull is on some tracks, right? So an interesting dynamic there, I thought, especially if it's going to be, well, tricky to set up, as Verstappen is kind of implying, and also their one-lap performance is kind of where they've been lacking so far. Hasn't really affected them so far this season, though, with the way the cars are easy to follow, especially with the straight in Baku. Probably not so much of a big deal if Verstappen starts second on the grid this weekend. But of course, it might not be Verstappen second on the grid. Who knows where Perez is going to challenge, because we've heard from Red Bull the last few days, they've effectively had to admit that, yeah, Perez is in the fight for the World Championship or the World Drivers' Championship. We're not going to necessarily stop him from doing that. He was the better Red Bull driver all weekends in Monaco. It's, unlikely that he'll be able to continue that form, but who knows if he does. Verstappen might have a bit of a problem on his hands, because at the start of the season it looked very clear that maybe Sainz was going to be the one taking points off Leclerc, and Verstappen wasn't really going to be challenged by his teammates. Now all of a sudden, if Perez keeps taking points off Verstappen, that's good news for Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari, especially if Sainz continues to underperform below the level that Perez, let's say, is driving at the present time. But Leclerc was on pole here last year, didn't work out for him, of course, in the race, and his pole positions or his qualifying positions so far this year are quite remarkable. He's been P1, or he's been on the front row every single race so far this year. His qualifying, honestly, if he keeps up this level, he's going to go down as one of the best qualifiers in Formula 1 history, because these numbers are ridiculous. Of course, translating this into race success, though, has been another story entirely. Now, as Giuliano de Kessa points out, I thought this was rather interesting just to mention that after what happened in Spain, there were some questions about, Charles Leclerc's second power unit, whether that would actually, effectively, whether it was completely broken and they wouldn't be able to use it again after the engine failure he had, which forced him to retire, unfortunately, from the race, at least from his perspective. Now, as is described here, apparently the PU2 will return, a new MGUH and turbo, though, the two parts that were damaged. But apparently the power unit itself is probably just about okay to keep running, which is going to be critical to reduce the potential number of engine penalties that Ferrari might have to take as the season progresses. They believe that they should be okay this weekend with regard to in comparison to how they've been the previous few weekends, saying that the F175 has excellent traction, should be good in Sector 2. The Barcelona upgrades increase the aero efficiency, in effect reducing drag on the car, which might lower the gap or reduce the gap to Red Bull on those straight lines, which of course they're certainly going to need to do. Now, this is Helmut Marko's opinion on the matter. We looked yesterday at some of his thoughts on Mercedes, their potential comeback this season, but as the interviewer asks him, why is Ferrari suddenly doing everything wrong once again? Helmut Marko says, you are under pressure. Leclerc has a hard time with that and makes mistakes. This is racing. In Monaco, we forced Ferrari to react. They reacted instinctively wrong. So that's the thing, basically saying that, okay, Red Bull takes a lot of credit for the way they conducted their race, forcing Ferrari into a difficult decision. But look, at the end of the day, Ferrari made those strategic mistakes that cost Leclerc the chance of the victory. But saying that not only did Ferrari crack under the pressure, but also the drivers themselves. It wasn't necessarily Leclerc's fault or Sainz's fault for what happened in Monaco, but previous races, you could argue. Really, Leclerc hasn't made many mistakes outside of in Imola, right, where he made that mistake where he was chasing Perez to try and get into second place, went off the track, almost been in the wall and didn't get any points at all, managed to recover to at least a decent points total. So effectively saying, look, Leclerc is under pressure. He's making mistakes, as are Ferrari. They found themselves after 3 races in such a promising position, and now that's effectively gone out the window entirely. Now, from the Ferrari side, I thought this was an incredibly interesting comment here from Mattia Binotto, describing their thoughts on this season in general. As he says, our objective was to be back competitive in 2022. We wanted to be competitive, not to win the championship necessarily. Being competitive is one fact, becoming world champion is another level of task. So almost not necessarily writing off their chances, but saying, look, we didn't really intend to win this season, we just wanted to be competitive. So I guess downplaying to some degree, trying to downplay the pressure on his team and the organisation, because, as Helmut Marko points out, they might be feeling the effects of that pressure so far from the fan base, internally within their organisation as well. And as he says, it would be wrong as a management to change the objectives from the ones we gave our team. We are trying to open a cycle to become world champion and try and stay there, but it will take time, almost saying that, look, it's probably not going to happen this year, but I'm sure, there's an element of which he's trying to downplay the pressure, but at the same time, it does feel a little bit strange that he would come out and say, yeah, we're not really trying to win the world championship, we're just trying to be up there, which is look, surely your goal is to win the world championship, and almost implying that if they don't end up winning it, if Charles Leclerc doesn't win, if Ferrari doesn't win the constructors, it's we weren't planning to win it anyway or whatever. So look, they say the ambition is there to be a champion, but right now it's not necessarily our full focus. Our focus is on each race. We are not looking at the classification. So, probably a good time they don't look at the classification, to be honest, the way they've been falling down the rankings the last few races. I wanted to mention this actually as well, because a kind of remarkable story coming out earlier today with regard to an as yet untitled, Formula 1 film starring Brad Pitt. It's said to be directed by Joseph Kosinski, who has an incredibly underrated track record, I think. If you guys have seen Top Gun Maverick, you know what I'm talking about, but also films like Oblivion and Tron Legacy from back in the day as well, and Hamilton is apparently going to produce the film. Now, producing is a little bit weird because you can just kind of give some money and yeah, effectively be a producer, but I'm sure Hamilton probably wants to, well, get involved to some degree on the creative direction here. So, you know, of course, look, we know Lewis is branching out from Formula 1, doing some other things. Thought this is a really cool one, so we don't know when this is coming out at all. But yeah, apparently a Formula 1 film with Lewis Hamilton producing, Kaczynski directing, and a Brad Pitt starring is coming sooner rather than later, which surely can't be bad. And just, of course, to finish off with this, because Sebastian Vettel in, of course, the Aston Martin, we looked at in the video, the Alfa Romeo, how competitive they can be this weekend. But Aston Martin, well, and Sebastian Vettel not in Aston Martin necessarily, has, well, had an incredible track record here in Baku. The last, well, 5 times it's been run since 2016. He's always finished in the top 4, on the podium 3 times. Whether they can get a surprise repeat this weekend remains to be seen. But I think, honestly, he's been upping his level, really, these last few weeks as well. But very much enjoyed your thoughts on the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.